So, hi everyone. I know this thing was listed as the Book of Ruth, but actually it's the Book of Ruth and Betye Saar. And I just checked on the website, and there is a David Hockney show that's just opening. Actually, it's opening tomorrow. That should be interesting too, but I don't have any images for that. Well, I just worked over the Book of Ruth and Betye Saar. So the Morgan Library and Museum, if you're not familiar with it, is a really, really fine collection. The main focus of their holdings are manuscripts and drawings. They mostly focus on that kind of thing. There's a lot of different kinds of memorabilia there too, but and the facility itself is really interesting because it was a mansion, and part of it is newly built. So I'm not sure when the renovation took place, but it was within the last 10 years. So it's a really interesting place. If you've never been there, it's really nice. They've got some really beautiful places a nice cafe. They always have good shows, interesting shows there. So,
and Larry, one more thing, it's close to Grand Central Terminal.
It is close to Grand Central. That's right.
Okay.
Yes, it's walking distance. So, yeah, it's a great place. So, what we're going to be doing is the Book of Ruth and Betye Saar. The Book of Ruth is really a kind of, I call it a Reader's Digest chapter in the Bible. It is very, very short. It's only about 3 or 4 pages long, and they cover a lot of territory in it. But it's a really interesting book in that it's about famine, flight, immigration, intermingling of religious sects at that point, which is it's a fascinating book, and it's about really a relationship between these two women, Naomi and Ruth, and it's an interesting story. So, well, I'll talk a little about that. And Betye Saar is a really fabulous assemblage artist who has been, working since I'd say she started working in the early 60s. And she's got these fabulous, crazy assemblage pieces that she's been working on for all this time. So,
Larry, what is assemblage?
Assemblage. Well, as you see in the image, it is a sculptural thing where she's taking found objects and various things and putting them together and creating sculpture and relief pieces from those objects. And really, it's as you see, this image with the caged figure in chains really goes to her roots as a Black artist. She was really dealing with her cultural history, and she was very much an interracial character. I mean, her the roots. Her grandfather was part Creole, part Crow Indian, down in Louisiana, and she has Black and white grandparents and that kind of thing. So it's an interesting pulling together of cultural elements in Betye Saar.
Somebody
But
asks if assemblage is a three-dimensional collage.
it more or less is, yes. Okay, so I'm going to move on, and I'm going to deal with the Book of Ruth first. So let's see. Here we go. It's essentially a story of fidelity and loyalty between Ruth and her mother-in-law, Naomi. It's not your usual mother-daughter-in-law joke here. This is like, you know, what you're seeing here is on the right in this wonderful illuminated manuscript, which is in the holdings of the Morgan. This is a 12th century illuminated manuscript. And what you see, the interchange with Ruth and Naomi. Naomi is seated, Ruth is standing. Basically, what went on in about 3 sentences is they were exiled out of Bethlehem, and not much good happens when you're exiled out of Bethlehem. So they were exiled out of Bethlehem with the whole family. There was a famine that was going on, so they went out into the land of the Moabites. I think that was the name. Basically, it was Naomi, her husband, and 2 sons that went on this exile. And the 2 sons married Moabite women, and Ruth was one of them. And what happens is Naomi's husband dies, the father, and the 2 sons die within a 10-year period. And Naomi decides that she's going to go back to Bethlehem, and tells the 2 daughters that they should stay amongst their people and remarry. And Oprah, I think it's Oprah, is the other daughter, and Ruth. Naomi argues with them, tells them they should stay amongst their people because it will be hard for them to come back with her. And Oprah goes, and Ruth says to her, "Do not press me to leave you or turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. There I will be buried. May the Lord do thus, and so to me, and more as well, even if death parts me from you." So this is really, you know, some hardcore solidarity here. So that's the image that you're seeing here, is that exchange on the right. And so they go back to Bethlehem, and basically gleaning was something which was done by women. They actually follow the harvest and glean the leftovers from the harvest from the field. So Ruth goes out gleaning, and she brings back the harvest, and you see her with the seed. Now this is a, you know, it's a really ripe image with her carrying the seeds in her belly like that. It's a very interesting story because it's kind of there's a sitcom aspect to this thing, and we'll get to that. So here is the image of the harvest happening, and you know, this fellow, you know, thrashing the seeds and all that, and you see down below Ruth gathering the seed, the leftovers, whatever fell to the ground. And on the on the right, you see Boaz, who is this wealthy landowner who's allowing Ruth to gather the seed, and you see him giving her more seed. That's sort of a implication of something to come. Ruth goes back to Naomi. Naomi tells her that basically Boaz is related, and in that culture at that time, when a woman is widowed, a relative can come in and marry her, and that would save the lineage. So she goes back to Naomi and explains that she's with Boaz, and Naomi tells her that Boaz is a distant relative, so that she should go back and lay at his feet. And so I dug this one up, which basically what happened was she went back, and he was an honorable man, so when he wakes up and finds her at his feet, quote unquote, he basically pledges to marry her, and she goes on to bear him children, and there's Naomi tending the child. It's an interesting story with a lot of very powerful implications about the relationship between these two women and their role. It goes into a lot more depth in the thing, but I'm going to keep moving on. And here you have her, nursing the child and them out on the fields. And the image that is on the right is actually, let me see if I've got this in here. The image on the right is basically the lineage through Ruth. Basically, the line goes down 3 generations to David, and then generations after that, supposedly, to Jesus. We don't know about that stuff, but that's how the lore is set up, and that's what this particular image portrays. And so, with that, there's really there aren't many very strong women in the Bible that have a strong relationship to one another that I know of, that's focused in like this. There are many strong women throughout the Bible, of course, but this particular story, just that relationship between Naomi and Ruth is so nurturing and so benevolent in many ways. And so, here is the, a 13th century version of the same story. And on the right, you see something of the Illuminated Manuscript, which is a contemporary version, which is also in this exhibition. It was created by an artist by the name of Barbara Wolf, and one side of the scroll that she created is in Hebrew, and the other side is in English. It's quite lovely too. So if you go to the website, you go to the Morgan Library website, you can see the exhibition. And in actuality, every Friday, they do virtual gallery tours. So next Friday at 3 o'clock, you can tune in. Today, they're already sold out. But if you sign in on their website next week, you can actually sign on for a virtual tour of the gallery and ask questions of the curator.
Larry, somebody
Yes.
had mentioned that there was also one at 12:30, besides at 3 o'clock, maybe. Maybe they're giving 2 a day?
I don't know. I didn't see that listed on the website, but I could be wrong.
Okay. Well, just so everybody knows.
Yes. Okay. So we are now going to move on to another.
Larry,
Yep.
Larry, another question.
Go ahead.
What is an illuminated manuscript?
Okay. Well, an illuminated manuscript is what you're seeing. These are basically, back to previous. They are sheets which describe visually the stories in the Bible. Okay. In this case, I mean, there are illuminated manuscripts that go with the Quran also, but these were done in medieval times. The one on the right was done in 1150. The one on the left was done in 1275. So these were basically for those who could not read the book. You know, if you were illiterate, you could get the story from the images. So that's basically what this is about. These were monks that would illustrate the Bible. So
Okay,
that's. Go ahead.
No, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yes.
The person who wrote about the Morgan having a 12:30 tour said that was the 12:30 tour is a generic introduction to the museum. That's probably why you didn't see it.
Yeah.
So 3 o'clock is the one about the Book of Ruth.
Right. Right. And probably worth finding out about. The museum itself is fascinating. So, okay. So I am going to move on now to Bet. Good old Betye Saar. And here's the lady. Let's see if I can move this around a little bit. Okay. Betye is in her 80s at this stage of the game, and she has been at it for a long time. Her work is a combination of a lot of different elements. There's, you know, basically she draws from a bunch of different occult practices, astrology, tarot, phrenology, voodoo kind of, but she also plays specifically with a lot of Black stereotypes and likes to pull those things out and use them and kind of de-power them in certain ways.
Somebody mentioned that the first slide was very Joseph Cornell.
Well, we'll get to that. Yeah, basically she started out as a printmaker, and in 1963 or 64, actually, let's see. Well, I'm going to go back further. In her childhood, she would go and stay with her grandmother, who used to walk them to the market on Saturdays, and they would pass by watchtowers, which absolutely fascinated Betye. She thought this was the grandest thing. She loved fairy tales and things like that, and this thing was really, you know, a remarkable thing. And it was still being built in the time that she was there. There's this Italian immigrant Mason named Simon Rodia. Actually, that's not his real name. But this was a major influence on her because she saw all these embedded objects in the stucco. What he would do is take, you know, pieces of crock shards and things like that and embed them into the cement. And he built these amazing towers out of rebar. There's 17 structures in the Watts Towers. So this just like spurred her imagination. She loved this stuff. And on the left, you can see one of her pieces. And she did a lot of work with bird cages and the idea of containment and enslaved characters. And inside there, you can see the Black Power fist contained inside there, with this set of dice on the bottom. In the background, you can also see that there's a washboard with some little character on it. I can't quite see that, but there's an owl up in the top of the cage. It's a very interesting set of images that she works with. And here's some close-up shots of the tower, and this is one of the entry gates. This shot on the right is from the 50s, so it was still being built at that time. Let me see if I can get a zoom in on some of this stuff, so you can see the things that he was embedding in the cement, and you know, the kind of patterns, the organic patterns that he was working with, and all of that. So he had a house on this property, and he just started building these things on the property and just kept going. Okay, and now we're going to get to Joseph Cornell. So in 1963 or 64, something like that, there was a major retrospective that toured and went out to the LA Museum, and she saw Joseph Cornell for the first time, and she was stunned by it. She just like, this guy is doing exactly what I want to do. I mean, she just saw this stuff and was enthralled. You know, this whole idea of history, of compressing history and putting it into a box, you know, taking all these images and sandwiching them together culturally was really something that she was into. And the other thing that happened at that time was she went to see some friends, and she saw a bunch of old window sashes leaned up against an old shack out in the back of their place, and said, "Oh, can I have those?" And she grabbed those things, and that was where she started to really do the assemblage pieces. These are prints that she had been working on, and she mounted them inside the window. And so here we go on her journey. You know, back to you know, this business of palmistry and all of that. You know, she you know, integrate these images, you know, of different cultures. There's some Egyptian aspects. There's you know, doilies and handkerchiefs and things like that she'd find in a thrift store, or, you know, she'd find an object on the street and she'd pick it up and put it into her things. It's really kind of accumulations, you know, survival of the spirit. There's these layers of of meaning and of, you know, these old objects that she'd find, and they, you know, they really were like objects that had meaning to her and spirit. So she tried to integrate those things. You know, it's really recycling the culture. So as I said, she was into playing around with cultural stereotypes, and you can't get much more of a cultural stereotype than Aunt Jemima. And basically, this was around the time of Martin Luther King's assassination, and she was very moved by that. It was really a major piece, and it she wanted to go out and protest, but she had 2 children and wanted to, you know, be there for them. So this was what she came up with as her way of expressing her outrage. And, you know, this is the liberation of Aunt Jemima. You know, it's like you see in the lower part in the frame here, the fist, you know, the Black Power fist, and, you know, she's holding all kinds. She's a gun-toting mama. Let's see. I want to move this. All right. Well, here we go. So, you know, basically there's the kind of historic resonance in these images. It's something that she's really fascinated with. You know, what do these things bring up when you assemble them together? You know, they're very dreamlike pieces, and really beautifully done. You know, this junk put together to make these really beautiful compositions. And, you know, again, drawing on this kind of Egyptian iconography, you know, her kind of Nubian ancestry. There's this whole thing about her kind of integrating of her racial history, and her books, which is something that they focus a lot on in this exhibit, because it is a library. Her sketchbooks are really wonderful. They're really inventive, and she's collaging together these images and playing around with the ideas that she's going to do for these assemblages. So I wish we could just turn the pages on the sketchbooks in here, but we got to deal with what we got. And here is a view of her studio, and, you know, she's got endless cabinets full of these crazy objects that she's gathered, that she's found at tag sales, at basically flea markets, at consignment shops, on the street. People give her stuff. You know, she'll go to basically barn sales or anything that she can find stuff at. And she's always looking down when she's out for her walks, because you never know what you're going to find. And the other thing that she was really into was integrating different cultures. And she would travel a lot and go to different countries and do sketchbooks and take things from those cultures and integrate them into the sketchbooks. So as you see, you know, this sketchbook is from Taiwan. It was from a trip there. So that's a fascinating aspect of her work.
Larry,
Yes.
somebody said, that's great advice. Stop looking at your phones and view the world in all its complexity and wonder. It's great.
And look at the junk at your feet. So the piece on the left is really techno junk. It's like you know, old transistor guts or the inside of a computer. She actually went to a one of the technology places, and they gave her a whole bunch of stuff that she had a lot of fun playing around with, and reanimating these things which were going to be tossed out, and then, you know, ragtime on the left is really a beautiful, powerful piece. You know, the basic idea of the time element in her work. You know, it's a clock without hands. It's, you know, she was fascinated. She had a whole collection of clocks in her studio, some of which ran, some of which didn't. But this is, you know, it's a really beautiful piece too. You know, it's like if you look inside the box at that background on the left-hand side of the box, you'll see that is one of the slave ships. It's one of the depictions of one of the slave ships that's behind that African mask image. And, you know, the time sequence in this thing is really an interesting element. And again, you know, the Grigri box, you know, this is back to the business of voodoo and that element of her heritage that goes back to that. Let me see if I can do some close-ups on this. Oh, wait a minute, didn't mean to do that. Jumping forward. Let's see. And I'm gonna zoom in on this little character so you can get a look at this. And, you know, there's snake skin, and there's this little lizardy guy, and these feather things that are going on here, the charm necklace to ward off spirits. You know, the whole bit is really amazing. And this little broken mirror piece up here, which just really looks like some branches coming out of the top of the head. It's amazing. This beautiful little dark moon. And all these little shells and just crazy little things that she would throw together. The spiritual element of this stuff is also something that's really there for her. Let's see. Yes.
Someone mentioned that they had seen her exhibit in both New York and Los Angeles. Both were focused on her heritage. They were
Yes,
artistically wonderful and historically thought-provoking.
they are. They are. And she really does installations of these pieces. She'll do a whole room, as you will see if you go to the Morgan site. You can see how there's color coordination. There's the setup of how the objects are interrelated to each other. She really participates in curating these shows. Okay, and there's no sense in dwelling on the past. And here we are. Uh, you, you you can't escape it. It's like, she's really, you know, taking all this stuff and giving it a presence. You know, you're not dwelling in the past, it's here. And these images of the Black Madonna and mixing that in with the you know the Jim Crow South heritage that she came out of. I'm gonna do a close up on this too. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Previous. All right, here we go. Zoom in. Okay, there we go. And the beautiful textural layers that are in these pieces, really something that I wanted to show. And she has these really amazing uh, titles for these pieces. Let me see if I can dig up some of that. Um, she wrote a lot of this stuff in her notebooks, and sometimes her titles are just really, they're wonderful. Let's see if I can find one that goes with these. Her early sketchbooks, recorded a range of dolls and, you know, pickaninny dolls and watermelon, holding watermelon wedges and all kinds of crazy stuff like that, which really, it caused a lot of pain for her as a child growing up. There's a whole sketchbook of black dolls. Um, you know, there's a blend of collage dresses and gloves and fabrics and fans and printed papers. And the washboards are another one of those emblems of that age. The idea of the housekeeper role as being the the ultimate task. Let's see if I'm looking for some of the titles on some of these pieces because they're really marvelous.
Larry, we do have one question.
Yeah.
Who is in the cage?
Who is in the cage? Well, it's a black figure chained to the thing, but she also dealt with goddesses and things like that. So it could be, a black Athena for all we know. I mean, it's who knows. I'm still looking.
Larry, someone was interested in another question. Could
Yep.
you talk about the woman in silhouette?
Well, I can't, because I don't know who or what she is, but the implication of this is basically the shadow cast from the history, that Black history that she's coming out of. You know, look at the base of this thing, the roots on this. Let me see if I can pull it up again. Zoom in. You know, these crow's feet, it's like a root system coming out of this figure. And again, it looks like it's an assemblage piece. It looks like it's different pieces that are put together. You know, basically, the business of the Jim Crow South, that whole aspect of things, the blackface business, that's integrated into this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to this last page. And she did this whole series of chairs, which are soul catcher pieces. This business of the bottles is something which harkens back to Africa, but it comes in through the Louisiana roots and all that. So these bottles turned upside down are soul catchers. They're ancestor spirits. They're capturing that whole spiritual aspect of where she comes from. Let's see if I can do the zoom in on this too. And you know, I can't quite make out what's down in there, but I think it's a bird. I think it's one of the, eagle type pieces. She had a whole series of these pieces that were in an installation in California. So what we've got is basically there's an interview with her from 2014 from UCLA, and that's definitely worth watching. It's only a half hour long. And then there's another one from Crystal Bridges with her and her daughter, Allison Saar, who is also a really wonderful artist. She does figurative work that is very evocative. So it's definitely worth taking a look at her work. Also, you can Google Allison Saar and see her work. And this talk from 2018 was actually quite interesting and worth watching. So that's gonna wrap this one up, unless there are questions that people have. Any questions? Let's see.
No questions, Larry.
No questions. Okay.
Why don't you go on to what you're going to talk about next week?
You know, I don't even remember what I was going to talk about next week because I've been so busy with this one.
Okay.
But
well, then,
we will be back next week.
Right, we'll be back next week with another set of images for you to watch.
Yes.
And Larry to explain. So I hope you'll come to our programs. I listed them all. If not, you don't remember them or you want to review, please go on our website, chappaqua.library.org. Okay, thank you all for coming.
Bye.
Bye-bye.